Intentional Currency podcast. My name is Yasmin. I'm the founder of the Intentional Currency, and our mission is to help Muslim women take control of their money, build wealth in a way that's pleasing to Allah, and feel confident making financial decisions that serve their families and their communities. In this podcast, we're bringing you real conversations from some incredible women who share our mission. These women are leaders, change makers, and financial literacy advocates from around the world. Together, we'll explore what it means to create wealth that's rooted in faith and designed to have a positive impact. Each guest brings their own journey, their struggles, their wins, whether it's setting up an emergency fund, learning how to invest, or figuring out how to manage finance and family. Our hope is that their stories inspire you, empower you, and remind you that financial empowerment is for every Muslim woman who wants it. Thank you so much for joining us, and let's get into the conversation. So, can you share a little bit about yourself and what led you to become so passionate about financial literacy?
Jazakallah khair, Yasmin, for having me. Thank you all. I really appreciate it and so excited to be here. I'm Nada Wafa. I'm a mother of 3 living in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I am currently pivoting into a new role in financial literacy education at my husband's wealth management company called Crescent Private Wealth in Cary, North Carolina. I also hold a PhD in education and a strong passion for empowering women, especially through financial confidence. So my journey began with my transition from academia mainly to more toward behavioral finance, and I'm interested in going deeper into financial therapy. And all of that is inspired by the desire to help women and Muslim women approach their wealth with confidence, with clarity, and ultimately with the intention, with the purpose of serving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala too.
Absolutely. And I love that you mentioned that it all comes back to intention. I kind of wanted to get into that a little bit because, of course, these conversations we're speaking in the context of being Muslim women. And I wanted to ask you, how do you feel that your identity as a Muslim woman shapes and sort of influences your financial goals?
So absolutely. So the identity really plays a huge role in this, and it really informs my approach, especially when it comes to, our Islamic values of giving and seeking that halal wealth. And that's mainly how we shape our own financial goals as well as a family. So when we're really understanding those principles, when we are really guiding our intention toward that ethical decision making, we are really prioritizing the idea of Barakah, especially when it comes to wealth building. And when we think about leaving a legacy, when we are wanting to leave a legacy for our children and their children and the generations to come, inshallah. And something that I recently came across too is from a book that I shared with you, the 50 it's called 50 Million Rising. I have it right here. The 50 Million Rising by Sadia Zahidi. And it's a book that really focuses on the topic of working women and how they transform the Muslim world. And one of the ideas that she shared in the book was that our role model, who was the first believer in Islam, was a businesswoman, right? And she was wealthy and she was a very skilled trader. She inherited her father's business. And not only that, but she expanded it even greatly. And she offered a job position to a man, and he accepted it. And then he started trading between Mecca and Syria under, of course, the guidance and the path of what she mentioned, his CEO. And so we can only guess who that is. It was Khadija radiallahu anha and Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And eventually they both got married. And the idea here is that we see this dedication, right? And we see this commitment to her story and the way that she's spreading Islam. And also she's building the wealth and the safety net that is needed for her and her family's financial independence, and how she was ultimately able to hold this power. Yet we as Muslims now, like in modern societies, we disregard this fact. And when we learn about the Sira, when we hear about this, it's just, something in the past. And so for many young Muslim girls and Muslim women, you know, we know that she's an influential role and she's one of many influential roles in Islam. But Khadija radiallahu anha really teaches us that foundation. She also teaches us that possibility of or the importance of woman's stability, her independence, her strength, be it through our society or even our financial well-being. So she really shows us and covers all of those foundational aspects.
It's such a good point that sometimes we read those stories and we feel inspired by them, but sometimes we don't necessarily feel like we can achieve something similar.
Mm-hmm.
And subhanAllah, it is so incredibly accessible to build wealth and to be that stability and to be that foundation for your family.
Absolutely.
I'm sort of going to put you on the spot because you mentioned something that I'm curious about. You mentioned when you set your financial goals as a family. And now I know for you and your family, both you and your husband are in the finance world. And I think it's beautiful to hear that you set financial goals as a family. And I'm sure that a lot of people would love to kind of get an idea of what that looks like. Would you be able to share how you manage your finances in that way?
Yeah, absolutely. So in Islam, we really try to follow the Islamic principles and the Islamic beliefs and values, that come into wealth management. So when it comes to investing, we really focus on Sharia compliance investing. When we want to give, when there's charities, zakat, all of that is involved. We really put that into the center of what we're capable and able of doing. And so really it kind of builds upon that. And then of course, there's building your emergency fund, securing, children's future, securing that legacy as well. Really focusing also, one of the major things that we have been focusing on is estate planning. What does that look like? Your will, your trust, all of that kind of plays a major role in the family financial well-being, especially in securing your wealth for your children and the generations, as well as giving back to your community. So that's a major part of our own financial goals as a family.
I love that. And I think that's subhanAllah, I really feel like there's so much barakah in clarity and having that transparency. And I think that there are so many Muslim families, but even non-Muslim families, who never get to the point where they speak about estate planning, where they plan for, what happens when somebody passes away. And what I think is so beautiful about Islamic finance and studying finance in the realm of Islam is that there is so much clarity, to the extent that sometimes it makes people uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. That, they don't want to talk about meher in terms of financial amounts. They don't want to talk about inheritance, even though Allah lays it down so clearly, those inheritance laws.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is one of the largest gaps that we can think of in our own ummah, in our own community, that, how can we understand wealth management overall? And I think with our own limited awareness of the opportunities and the scales that we have from resources or even halal investment options, it's really important to focus on dismantling those misconceptions around saving and budgeting and your emergency fund and your investment accounts and all of that. And just a general understanding is necessary and needed to engage with, various needs in the financial services industries and institutions. But then again, there is also that lack of trust, lack of knowledge that really we need to focus on. And even when I look at statistics and research and all of that, we learn, a lot of information within what the need is for us as Muslim women. And so in general, when we think about it in 2030, statistics show us that women in the United States will control about 67% of the stock market's wealth. And I also recently came across a research article about Muslim women, and it mentioned that the World Bank estimated around, I believe it was 1.3 billion people living in poverty. But not only that, the saddest part of that is that it's 70% of that population is actually women.
Mm-hmm.
And so working with women, collaborating on initiatives, initiatives similar to the intentional currency, and working with like-minded women as well, and spreading that awareness and understanding of financial literacy and the need within our Muslim community is not just just something for those who want to learn. It really is now a must. So that's really where we're heading. And if we look at like the history of Muslim women, and we look at our own Islamic history, it shows us that the role of woman in Islam is really a poorly misunderstood concept that we have, especially for us in the Muslim world. But when we look at Sharia, when we look at Islamic law, we know that it recognizes every individual's right to wealth, whether male or female. And even though, what we see and hear is that women are marginalized, they are underserved, and all of that, we really want to ensure that women know that they can reach their highest potential, especially through our religious beliefs and wealth. So when we have like this backwardness understanding of women and our Islam, of how women in Islam are, it's not because really of our religion. And it's not that our religion made us this way and made us backwards, but it's really because of the cultures and the societies that we live in. But we know that Sharia has always, granted that right. And it's always, again, also been ignored, misunderstood. And sometimes it can even be seen like as a burden to understand. So it, really comes down to personal acknowledgement and awareness that this is now a need.
Absolutely. And I think that it's such a great point that I think that a lot of Muslim women feel like it's a burden to go into finances or to go into Islamic finance to understand what's actually required of them. And I also think there's a lot of trauma and fear.
Absolutely.
I think that a lot of people have seen either their mothers or their grandmothers suffer a great deal financially in their relationships, put them in very difficult situations. And I think that a lot of women are afraid that they may dive into Islam and discover something that they don't like. And I think to reassure anybody who's listening that much of what has been oppressing Muslim women financially for generations does not come from Islam. Unfortunately, it comes from colonizers who have come in and implanted their own ideas and their own, awful depictions of women, taken women's rights away and reframed it as Islam. When a lot of the frameworks that oppress women, when we talk about sort of losing your financial identity when you get married, of, your husband's wealth is your wealth and you get to stay home and you don't have to worry about money. Like all of these concepts do not come from Islam. Muslim women don't lose their identity when they get married. On the contrary, it should actually grow the amount of freedom that they have, and it should increase the amount of financial liberties that they have.
Absolutely.
And so it's so important to not be afraid and to actually go in and discover how beautiful Islamic finance is and how much Islam has to offer women financially.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a big point when you talk about the colonizers and the Western concepts that has influenced the world overall. And it's important for us also to distinguish culture and religion because they're two different constructs here. And although, they can seem to be intertwined, it's really important to distinguish what our religion says from what our culture does. And a lot of our cultures just diminish those Islamic teachings and laws. And it's not even just culture, to be honest. It's the political landscapes that we're in. It's the historical context. It's who really controls the history and what's written there. And all of those, they raise concerns when it comes to Muslim women and wealth. And like you said, in Islam, there is a protection of wealth for a Muslim woman. So there are legal safeguards when it comes to marriage, when it comes to divorce, when it comes to inheritance. And we need to understand the Islamic law. And there's always room for growth for that. We need to understand what the Sharia is and how it gave women the rights to own, to inherit, to do things with their wealth, to transfer wealth. The concepts of sadaqah, the concepts of zakah, avoiding riba, the interest, all of those. And all of those really influence the way that we behave and how we manage our financial goals and our methods, even for wealth management and how that looks like. So really, it's that idea of focusing on the balance between our worldly success and what we're able to achieve with our spiritual accountability, and really holding that up to par.
That's an excellent point. And I think remembering that ultimately we don't, and I've said this before, but like we're not really operating on any currency of this world. We're only operating on the currency of barakah. And so the more that we go in and set our intention, and like you said, like making sure we're not touching riba, making sure that we are regularly paying our zakat and the correct amount and being diligent about these things, we know that, sometimes there are higher fees for wealth management services that are putting in all of the effort required to make sure that these products are Sharia compliant. And we have to remember that ultimately those perhaps higher fees or slightly lower profits come with more barakah. And there's no way to quantify what that looks like in our lives. And so it's so important to understand that this wealth management can be such a beautiful form of increasing your risk just by you setting the intention of wanting to do things correctly. And so they're not separate entities, your religion and your wealth. They're very much one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this concept of barakah too, it's a pretty tough concept to really think about and wrap our heads around, because, it's, especially when you talk about it in your extended community, it's a really difficult concept because it transcends and it really goes beyond any logical reasoning. Like, how is it that when I give, I get more? And it requires this level of spirituality too. And it's really like flipping a switch from the materialistic part of our life and understanding that gaining abundant can happen in something else, right? And it's really important to just recognize and appreciate the barakah that we have in our life in the form of, the physical manifestation part and that non physical, or that part that we don't really see around, but we can feel it. Focusing on value-based investments, ethical-based investments, ensuring, that our wealth ultimately serves a purpose. It gives back to your community too, to your families, to your extended families, and ultimately, your ummah and the world, Muslims all around the world.
That's such a good point, because I think actually you've just summed up quite a bit of what Islamic finance is really just ensuring that the money you receive, the wealth that you have, does it serve a purpose?
Yeah, absolutely.
And a purpose that's much deeper than just profits, right? For us, when we talk about purpose, it's how are we using this privilege that Allah has given us, this blessing, to serve?
Alhamdulillah. Absolutely. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah.
So I want to ask you, you work with women, you speak with a lot of women, you're very much in the financial industry. What do you think are the common challenges and misconceptions that Muslim women come up against?
I think the main misconception is that it's solely a male's responsibility. Or that investing is haram, or that it is risky and it's not accessible to us as Muslim women. Now, the involvement of men can help, of course, in changing the views of society and that societal landscape, and it's very much necessary, especially when we're facing, what has happened and in historical times. So I do believe that men should play an active role when it comes to the struggle for Muslim women and wealth. But absolutely, this idea that it's solely just a male responsibility to do that, and not fully understanding what the Islamic law has established for us as Muslim women. And knowing that there are resources out there like the intentional currency and Yasmin, and the educational environment that you are creating through financial literacy, and focusing on, halal investing and what that looks like for us. And really just trying to align our Islamic values with the Muslim woman's lived experiences and the current situation that she's in. So really, it just requires for us to unlearn and relearn and reframe what financial literacy means for a Muslim woman, and understand that reframing finance as a tool for empowerment rather than a burden or something that we should be scared of. I think that is one of the most important ways to dismantle those misconceptions around finance when it comes to Muslim women, in order to ultimately, build the confidence that we need. One thing that I heard is that, women are already empowered. We as women have power, but collectively we have an impact. And so this is what I ultimately also feel, that when we're working together, through the intentional currency, through your programs, through just building your own financial literacy knowledge, we collectively can make an impact when it comes to Muslim women wealth.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree. And it's something that I speak about a lot, is that by taking responsibility and by, putting yourself in the driver's seat of your finances, it's not just your own family that you lift. Like, it's your family, it's your, your extended family, your community, your relationship. You lift everybody around you. And the barakah is like, you can't even start to count how much that is. And so even for us, I've seen clients who, start off with our free ebook and who message me and say, I would love to join one of your programs. I can't afford it right now. And then they can afford to join the Wealth Circle. And I have a client who just came in, started at the ebook, went into the Wealth Circle, and alhamdulillah, she's going to be joining the investing program in January. And subhanAllah, like, what touches me is that when you set the intention and when you understand that this is a form of worship and that Allah has entrusted us with wealth. And we know that Prophet ﷺ tells us that the test of our time is wealth. And it is this abundance. It is the fact that it's so easy to not be mindful when you know that the next paycheck is coming, when you know that we live in these Western countries and that wealth is just, subhanAllah, like, the reality is most of the world doesn't live like us. Most of the world doesn't drive fancy new cars. They're not getting a new car every 5 years. They're not living in houses that have rooms that people never use. SubhanAllah. And so it's so important to bring it back and realize that even if we're stuck in this mindset of comparison and comparing ourselves to these influencers, that we are among the wealthiest people on earth, and that this is a test for us. And we have to be mindful, because Allah will ask us for every dollar that we receive, every dollar that we invest, and every dollar that we didn't invest. Absolutely. So I really agree. You said something that I think is important, which is really shifting the framework of what does financial literacy mean for a Muslim woman. And if you were to break it down, what do you think are the basics of financial literacy for a Muslim woman?
When you're approaching money management, it's really as a means to fulfill your responsibility and contribute to your family, to your community, to the broader community. So really educating yourself on the basics in the beginning, like budgeting, savings, and letting your values guide those decisions ultimately. And also what I mean by collectively, working with like-minded women, working with people who can lift you up, because when it comes to that unification in our ummah, financial empowerment is one of the keys to rebuild a successful ummah when we really think about it. And that financial empowerment allows us as Muslim women to contribute, to continue on to contribute, especially through confidence, through independence. And it really opens up the door to education, entrepreneurship, taking on roles in your community. So taking on community leadership roles, and really striving to focus on the impact that you can do, because we each have that power within us to create an impact. And we all know that empowerment comes through education.
Alhamdulillah. And I think it's beautiful what you mentioned, because we feel, I think, on an individual level, very disconnected from that. And I think very disenfranchised and discouraged, especially with the political landscape and everything happening in the world. But every single one of us has the power to be a part of that. And it's so easy to be a part of it. It's only through intention. Like, subhanAllah, if you make the intention to go out and work and earn a living, and to use a part of that to invest in our community, in companies that are aligned with our ethics, in an effort to amplify our voices as Muslims and to renew this, the incredible ummah that we once had, then subhanAllah, every single one of us gets to be connected and gets to be a part of that and gets to be rewarded for that when inshallah it does happen. And so it's really a beautiful thing, to be able to have exactly as you mentioned, that educational piece that allows you to be a part of it.
Absolutely.
So I don't want to take so much more of your time, but I did want to ask you, so what's one key piece of advice that you would give to Muslim women who are at the very beginning of their financial journeys?
Absolutely. I think I kind of touched upon that, and it's very similar to how you share it through the wealth circle. Really start with that intention, and understand that this is a responsibility that we have upon us as Muslim women.
It's true.
And continue on building a community, continue on building a surrounding community and a broader community, just to empower each other. Maybe you can even, within your small circle, just start by tracking, your spendings, and having someone hold you accountable for certain things, creating a simple budget plan, focusing on your financial goals. How much do you want to give? All of those start with that setting of intention. So even just setting a small financial goal, just saving for a halal emergency fund, or, working towards something consistently, can definitely help and can amplify your own financial literacy as well. And most importantly, I believe, and one of the things that I continue on hearing is, celebrate those small progress that you go through, especially because that helps build that momentum. And so absolutely just continue on, celebrating those small progresses to build on that piece.
It's so true. And I think this is, human nature, right? But we underestimate the impact of the boring stuff, and we overestimate the impact of things that actually don't matter as much. And when it comes to finances, so many people underestimate the impact that something as simple as budgeting would have. Something as simple as having an emergency fund or having financial goals. Like you said, everybody wants to know, the only thing I need to know the top 5 stocks that I should invest in. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, as we know in the investing world, the most successful investors aren't the ones that are picking stocks. They're the people who have a very clear budget so that they can consistently save, they can consistently invest, and their investments are actually very boring for the most part, right? And so it's so important, like you said, that the big thing is budgeting. The big thing is setting a savings goal. The big thing is having a financial goal. It feels like those are the small things, but those are actually the big things in your finances, subhanAllah.
And they're absolutely personalized. So you can provide a general, but they're really much personalized to your values and to your intention and where you want it to go eventually, and how you want to work that out based on your beliefs, based on your values. And it really just setting that intention first, and then letting all of that unfold, and aligning it again with your values and belief system.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last question I want to ask you is kind of like, we'll end on the topic of hope, right? What do you hope to see change in the financial landscape for Muslim women in the coming years?
Yes, that's a great question. I hope to see more financial services being offered for specifically the Muslim woman, especially here in the United States. We can see a little bit more across the world, but absolutely offering, more halal resources and products. Community building is one thing that I really hope to see. Financial literacy, community building for the Muslim woman, education for the Muslim woman in pursuing financial literacy, and just a shift toward that unification, and understanding that collective community, investment, wealth management strategies as well.
Absolutely. No, it's an excellent point. And I think that there is so much wealth in our community. There are so many people who have, mashallah, high incomes. There's a lot of wealth coming into our community every day. And it's only through this education piece that we're going to be able to use that money as our voice and to grow our impact, inshallah.
Absolutely, inshallah. And the more that I think about it too, so where do we learn about money, right? And if it's not taught in schools, and unless you go into like a financial related field, there is a high chance that a Muslim woman is not going to learn about wealth management, about investing and saving and personal finance. And it's because, making financial mistakes can happen, and it can cause a lifetime of issues. We really want to fill in that gap, and we want to provide women with the knowledge, with the resources and the tools, and really personalize it and empower to really understand how to protect and plan and manage your present finances as well as your future.
It's an excellent point.
Yeah, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Nada, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for speaking with us. And so may Allah reward you for all of the effort that we see, and more importantly, all of the effort that we do not see.
Thank you. Jazakallah.